With me today is Anna Marie. She's an undergraduate student who's been studying gay families and gay children, and I asked her to join us today so I could hear some of the things she's been learning.
Well, what I did earlier this year is I did a study on how gay families are changing America. And the findings of my study focused in on children of gay parents and whether there's any significant difference in their upbringing, outcome, views on life than children of straight parents. And the Patterson study encompasses approximately 36 studies that have been done over the past 15 years.
Okay, just the Patterson study is...
The Patterson study is a lady named Dr. Patterson, and what she did is went through 36 studies, like I said, over the past 15 years, correlated the results into one very large study to find whether children of gay parents grow up differently than children of straight parents. And in statistical terms, there was no significant difference. And what that means is that children of gay parents grow up just the same as children of straight parents. The one difference is children of gay parents are more tolerant of other ethnicities, races, and disabilities and other people.
Interesting.
And I find that a very good thing to have. But some of the things I found out for children who are finding out that they were gay are extremely disturbing to me.
Children who found out they were gay but they were living in straight households?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
What did you find out?
What I find out is that children who are growing up in our society that is non-accepting of alternative lifestyles, or how I feel it is, of a biological difference, tend to have much higher rates of drug abuse, alcoholism, and suicide. And this says to me that our society has got to change. We have got to accept homosexuality.
Wasn't there a study done by the U.S. Department of Health or something on teenage suicide?
Yes. And what they found was approximately 30% of all teenage suicide is gay children.
30%?
30%. 3 out of 10 children are suiciding because they think they're gay or because they're finding out they're gay.
With all due respect to people's religious differences, I think we could put this aside a little bit, at least to the point that we get them to stop killing themselves.
That's right. The recognition of homosexuality as a legal and moral union in this country will strengthen families, not tear them apart.
That's a statement that I bet flies in a lot of people's face.
Oh, big time. What you find
What
is...
do you, when you make that statement, or what supports that?
I think that you have a lot of gay couples that face the social pressures and don't stay together as long as they would have if it was an accepted union. So you have higher divorce rates, if you will, in the gay communities. Now today, straight families, the divorce rate is 50%. 50% of all marriages end in divorce. It tends to be a little bit higher for gay families because of the social stress and pressures. So by legalizing, socializing this type of union, you will strengthen families by having longer monogamous relationships, which also brings into the AIDS factor. You will possibly have a lessening of this type of problem within the gay community because you're strengthening the family.
I suppose the other advantage to having longer lasting relationships in gay families is that there are a lot of children in gay families.
Exactly. The one problem you have with gay families and straight families is divorce. And whether it's people that are married and get legally divorced, this piece of paper that says we're not together anymore, or a gay couple that decides not to have a union anymore, that child is still affected in the same way as if you have separation between straight families.
There's no significant psychological impact difference?
No impact difference based on the homosexuality of the parents. They may face more social problems based on the fact that their parents are gay. But provided that this is dealt with in a healthy way, and the parents don't try to hide it or condemn it themselves, etc., you still end up with a healthy child.
But I mean, when parents split, regardless of what the gender of the parents is, it has the same effect on the child.
Correct.
Regardless of what their parents' gender is. Divorce has the same effect.
And it's very bad for children. And it depends on the age of the children. Younger children tend to survive divorce a little bit better than older children do. And boys tend to survive divorce a little bit better than girls do.
That I hadn't heard.
Yeah. Girls tend to internalize the feelings and bring them forth into other relationships. and seeing that their mother is divorced, because typically women are economically downgraded by divorce. And little girls see this, and they go through this in their lives. Well, can I make it this time? My mother's been married 4 times. So I grew up with some of this. I'm strong enough to bypass some of it, too. I've only had 2 long-term relationships, and they've worked out both well. So that's long-term.
Encouraging.
Yeah, I have a lot of short-term ones, but that's just fun.
Which I suppose that term in itself is interesting. I don't know if you would have heard people 20 years ago talking about long-term or short-term relationships.
No, they probably wouldn't have. I was asked at the beginning of a sociology class what type of relationship I was in, marriage, living together, etc. And I stated that I was in a facilitative relationship. And we ended up in a long discussion on that one.
A wonderfully technical-sounding term.
Well, you have to look at a relationship as not just a marriage of, souls romantically, or a marriage of incomes, or a marriage of the minds. Any type of union that's going to work is going to have to be facilitative. You're going to have to help each other out through life.
Essentially, there has to be a connection on all levels.
Yes, or most of them. Being a psychology student, one of the things that I've learned is opposites don't attract. Or if they do, they certainly don't stay together. Similarities tend to attract. People of the same socioeconomic background tend to attract each other. People in the same religion, people in the same intellectual groups, etc. Those people tend to be attracted to one another and stay together longer because they have focused in on the same interests. Have you found that out for yourself?
I don't know. It seems the couples that I'm familiar with, and in my own experience, I guess, for every similarity there's a difference. And at any point in time, it's difficult to say whether the similarity or the difference will be most evident.
Okay.
But I don't know if... See, I was told differences attract, or opposites attract, in the sense that each person is looking for something they don't see in themselves, but they do see in their partner.
Yes and no. You look for some compensatory effects. You look for some things to fill out yourself, to enhance your own self. But as far as things like background, education, religion,
more foundational
politics,
kinds.
more foundational types, not value issues, but more foundational issues, you do tend to look for someone who's very similar to yourself. Because you want someone that agrees with you. You don't want someone to argue with, especially on those foundational issues.
So it's, for example, housekeeping is really not a foundational issue then. One person is messy, the other's clean, but that's, so differences, but those are not the kinds of differences you're talking about.
Absolutely not. The relationship I'm in now, my partner is a little bit of a neatnik, especially with my schedule. I'm a slob. And we work it out.
I want to think some of that, I don't know, I guess I defined the norm when I was in college, but it seemed like everyone expected college students in general to not have any time to be neatniks. But
you don't.
But in any case, getting back to families, I guess, thinking of the numbers and numbers of gay couples, a lot, I suppose, are fine, but there's a lot of them, I would guess, that really would like to have kids and to develop something perhaps a little reminiscent of the family they grew up with.
Of the nuclear family?
Yeah.
I think that gay couples have every much a right as straight couples to have children, based on the fact that they're able to parent that child well. There are straight couples that should not be allowed to breed. And I think there are probably gay couples that should not be allowed to have children also. But I think that if a gay couple truly and sincerely wants a child, it's much easier for lesbians than it is for gay men.
Oh, for obvious reasons.
Yes, for obvious reasons. But there have been several cases lately where gay men have adopted children. There is the Big Brothers program that does not prohibit gay men. There are other programs, especially when you go into the educational area, where you could aid in fostering children and becoming some type of role model for children. And I don't see any reason why gay men can't do this just as well as straight men. If not better, because they've faced prejudice in their own life, where they can connect, especially with a minority child that faces prejudice every day.
It's amusing, during the week I work at an antique store. And it's amusing sometimes to talk with the other ladies there and compare notes. And they keep reminding me, as we're talking about relationships, something to the effect of, well, that's no different than dealing with my husband. Which I think is hysterically funny, but it just comes down to people are people are people, and relationships are relationships are relationships. Every relationship is unique, every person is unique, but there's some things that just transcend all the borders.
That's right, and I think being a good parent is something that transcends. You can be a good parent whether you're gay, straight, asexual, whatever. I think any of those people can be good parents. And there are so many children out there that need a home. There's nothing that says a gay couple needs to adopt an infant either, because that is the most difficult child to adopt. But there are plenty of 4- or 5-year-olds out there that just want to be loved. And why does your sexuality, preference, biological imperative, what have you, what does that have to do with loving a child? Zip, nada.
It comes down to the same basic thing I think everyone recognizes, but people don't seem to be willing to live by, that it is that question of love. It's a question of how committed the parent is to cultivating the child. I've always been a little bit unnerved by the terminology of shaping a child, or raising the child to be this or be that, and instead of, to me, I guess it seems like the only loving way to approach it, that you cultivate the child, because when a child comes into your life, it's a person with potential, with unique potentials that you probably don't realize. And if you're trying to superimpose yourself onto that person, there's probably a lot of neat things in the child that the world is never going to see.
The best way to realize those potentials in the child is to give them opportunities. I just attended a lecture on this last week, and it was really fascinating. This professor said, in order for the child to realize the potentials within the child, you have to give them opportunities. And if that means you have them, diddle on a piano one day and maybe take a dance lesson the next week, and maybe take them to a tennis court the next week, you have to give this child the opportunities to see what's out there. I mean, I personally don't play tennis or golf. My partner had played soccer for years, so I would like my child to try tennis or golf, but I'd also like my child to try swimming, which I did try, or dance, which I did for years, or soccer, like my partner did. But I'm not saying he has to play soccer, or she has to dance, or vice versa.
She has to become an accomplished pianist, or what have you.
Yeah. I just want her to have, him, whatever. I want that child to have opportunities to fulfill themselves. And I tell you one thing, I will raise my child the same way my mother raised me. And that's tolerant for ethnicities, tolerant for different socioeconomic classes, and tolerant for different sexual orientations. That's the way I was raised. And my child's going to have the same benefit.
I remember speaking with one lady several years back who her son confided in her one day. I think she said he was maybe 10 or 11 at the time. Some concern that he thought he might be gay. And rather than get upset or anything, she just left it open-ended, recognizing that this is a person entrusted to her to cultivate. She just said, well, I guess we'll find out. And to me that seemed like such a perfect way to leave it. But it is something to remind us that we have to be careful about the preconceptions we come to a situation with. To assume, in regard to any job, that either a man or a woman can do it better than the other, or that it's better to be straight than gay, or vice versa, or better to be one ethnicity or another. A person is a person is a person. Every person has potential, and every person deserves every opportunity.
Well, don't we have a doctrine in this country? Let's see if I can remember. All men are created equal.
A lot of things that were supposed to have been true 200 years ago.
But when you
in
think
any
about
case.
I mean, we are all people. And that's something that you have to transcend, especially when it comes to our children and the next generation. And if I have a child that comes to me and says, Mom, I think I'm gay, Probably my first response is going to be, well, that limits you to one choice. You sure you don't want to do both? But you have to realize that that is not something, at least my personal feelings,
Mhm.
based on some of the experiments, based on some of the data, is I don't think that you grow up and choose.
Mhm.
I really
I know
do
I
think-
didn't.
Yeah, I really do think that's something, that's a way you're born.
Mhm.
And that's not something, it's like trying to change a left-handed child to a right-handed child. What you end up with is an unhappy right-handed child.
Yeah. Be interesting, I mean, that's another discussion, be interesting to hear someday what was the outcome of that. Tip of the iceberg I heard was just that, in going back, they've discovered there's quite a bit of psychological damage done. I mean, it wasn't just a case of somebody having sore knuckles from having their hand wrapped with a ruler or something, but there really was some psychological damage done in trying to reprogram kids to operate in a way that they just weren't born to operate.
That's correct. You're correct in that.
But that'd be an interesting future discussion.
Well, think about the psychological discussion for a gay child who's been forced to be heterosexual.
Yeah, or as I mentioned briefly on a past show, I think, that it sounds too simple just to say it, but for the most part, gays really are raised to hate themselves.
Correct.
And that sounds like such a strange thing to say, and yet in so many subtle, indirect ways, all the omission, in our first reading books, you have a man and a wife,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like all through school, it's always a man and a wife. You never see any other, anything. And in my education, I don't know that we even ever saw any couple that wasn't white.
I was raised the same way.
I mean, there's a lot of omissions in our educational system that really do need to be addressed.
And it's people like you doing this show and people like me doing my research that are probably going to go forward and change some of this.
Let's hope so. Thank you for being with us.
Sure.
People have often speculated, giving their own opinions of just what it is that distinguishes people from other animals. What quality or characteristic we possess that no other living creature on earth possesses. To reverse the question, I'm more interested in asking what makes us truly human, and then pursuing that quality, so that we can be the best humans there can be. Again, however, it seems to me that there is no one right answer for everyone. Something that I do find to be inhumane, however, is the willingness that individuals frequently display to go to war with people or ideas whenever a lack of understanding is present. We want to know who the enemy is so that we can kill the enemy. Ultimately, we may come to understand that the only true enemy is ignorance. Though it is an enemy that wears many faces, ignorance is still ignorance, something we don't know, and because we don't know, or refuse to accept, or to respond to the realization that we simply don't know, we act, and our actions do not answer the concern. Abortion, for example. Millions of dollars have been spent arguing over abortion. I suggest to you that the problem is not abortion, but unwanted pregnancies. Somewhere along a similar line, we also need to address overpopulation, but that's another subject altogether. When we respond to something other than the actual problem, problems only multiply. Like the animated broomstick in the Walt Disney Mickey Mouse production entitled The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Ignorance is displayed when we try to dictate the choices of another's life without considering the things that produce their current situation. Example. Some have decided that sexual orientation is determined by choice rather than by genetic or physical qualities. But this is only credible if all evidence of physical differences between homosexuals and heterosexuals is thrown out. Then we go on to assume that differences are bad instead of learning how differences can be good. In the end, we find ourselves looking for ways to eliminate differences and too late discover that the differences we've eliminated were in fact very necessary for our own survival. Sometimes we don't want to face our own ignorance, and we turn to whatever's at hand that seems to solve the problem. Example: we don't believe rehabilitation of criminals is possible, so we insist on capital punishment. Criminal rehabilitation takes lots of time and is impossible without some basic assumption of available love. Someone has to care before any psychologically traumatized person has any hope of being helped. Someone has to be willing to make a way through whatever bureaucratic political mishmash opposes the person in need. I believe that we have sufficient psychological, medical, and scientific resources to answer anything facing any person on this planet, if only those resources can be brought to bear on the specific challenges to life, instead of being negatively focused on each other. If love is truly not available, however, probably is better to put an end to the psychological suffering of the individual in question. If love is truly not available, however, all of us are at risk to some extent or other. Let's be faithful to the best of our abilities to put a little more love out into the world today. Maybe if everyone put a little love out there for someone else who is in need, there might eventually be enough to go around.
That was it.
The most fundamental laws of the United States direct that freedom of speech and the right to peaceful assembly not be denied anyone. Yet in so many subtle ways, individuals or people groups are censored each and every day. Sometimes it is done by deliberately not inviting someone to participate in a public forum on a current issue because the person's dissenting opinion is well known. Sometimes advertising leaflets or posters are removed from public display before they can be read by anyone, even though all necessary permission for their display or distribution has been received from all necessary authorities. Sometimes an individual in a public meeting is denied any opportunity to speak or to offer a contrasting perspective. Through repetitious classes in American history and government throughout my years in the public school system, I was taught that a well-informed voting citizenry is essential to a strong democracy. If information is being screened, withheld, or hindered in any way, important decisions will be made with only a partial understanding of the matter at hand. In political, social, and spiritual matters of life, wise decisions can only be made by persons who truly have all the relevant facts. When we reach that point, we need to give each other the benefit of the doubt and listen very carefully, with every means at our disposal, to all that life has to teach us. In several places in the Bible, there are long records of family lineage. Sometimes the records go on for chapter after chapter after chapter. I remember questioning why it was so important to include the names of persons, all of whom have been dead for thousands of years and whose names are not mentioned anywhere else at all. It bothers me that someone would be defined only by their relationship to others, rather than by their own characteristics or accomplishments. Each name in these records is simply identified as being someone's father, someone's son, someone's mother, someone's wife, or someone's daughter. Yet it does point out that a certain part of who we are is given to us, and a certain part we create, and a certain part we pass on to future generations. Whatever we have been given, let's make it into something good. Whatever we have created, let's act responsibly and intelligently. Whatever we will pass on to future generations, let's make it something that lasts, something of true value.